I went to my routine immigration check-in. I never came home to my children again. My name is Lucia. I am telling you this story from a room in my mother's house in a country I barely recognize anymore. My children are in the United States. My youngest just turned 3. I was not there when she blew out her candles. I was not there when she woke up that morning. I was not there when she looked around the room, full of balloons, and asked her father where I was. He told me later he didn't know what to say, so he just held her. I came to this country 11 years ago. I want to be honest with you because this story doesn't work if I'm not. I came without documents. I crossed because I had no other choice. The violence where I lived had gotten to a point where staying felt like choosing death slowly. I was 22 years old and I crossed with my sister and a man. We paid everything we had saved to guide us. My sister didn't make it across. I kept going because she told me to. I settled in a city in the southeast, found work cleaning offices at night, learned English from a book. I borrowed from a public library and never returned because I was too embarrassed to go back when it was overdue. I met my husband Marco at church. He helped me file the right paperwork, find the right lawyer, show up to the right offices. We applied for asylum, denied, applied again, denied again. But each time our lawyer said, keep checking in, keep showing up. As long as you keep showing up, the process continues. So every month for 6 years, I walked into that building and signed my name and walked back out. Every single month, without missing once. In those 6 years, I had 3 children, Elena, Mateo, and baby Rosario, who came into the world 2 days before Christmas and had her father's eyes and my mother's name. All 3 born here, all 3 citizens, all 3 asleep in their beds the morning I walked out the door and did not come back. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Marco had already left for work. Elena was 7 and getting herself ready for school, the way she had started doing lately, picking her own clothes, brushing her own hair with that serious, concentrated face that made her look so much older than she was. Mateo was 5, eating cereal, watching a cartoon, completely unbothered by the world the way only 5-year-olds can be. Rosario was almost 3 and still in her pajamas, following me around the kitchen the way she always did in the mornings, one small fist wrapped in the back of my shirt, never wanting to lose track of me, not even for a minute. I remember thinking that morning how much I loved that. How annoying it could feel sometimes when I was in a hurry. How I would give anything to feel that small fist in the back of my shirt right now. I kissed all 3 of them before I left. Elena looked up from her backpack and said, Mama, don't forget you promised to do my hair tonight. The complicated braid. You promised. I said, I won't forget, Mia. I will never forget. I walked out the door. The check-in office was a beige room on the 4th floor of a federal building downtown. I had been there so many times I knew which elevator was faster. I knew the woman at the front desk by name. I knew which chair had the wobbly leg. This was routine. This was nothing. I had done this dozens of times. I signed in, waited, was called back. Different officer than usual. 2 of them. They asked me to come with them. I thought it was a new form, a different room. They walked me down a hallway I had never been down before and through a door I had never been through before. And one of them said, Ms. Lucia, you are being detained pending removal proceedings. The room didn't spin. I didn't scream. I just stood very still and thought about 3 children at home who did not know where I was. I asked if I could call my husband. They said later. I asked about my children. My baby is not even 3 years old. Her father doesn't know. Please, someone needs to tell him. They said later. They moved me to a holding room with a bench and a drain in the floor, and fluorescent lights that never turned off. I sat on that bench and thought about the braid I had promised to do that night. They transferred me that night. A van, then a bus, then another van. By the time I arrived at the facility, it was past midnight. I had been awake for nearly 20 hours. I still had not reached Marco, somewhere in a house several states away. 3 children had gone to sleep without knowing where their mother was. I thought about that the entire drive. I could not stop thinking about it. The facility was in another state. I did not know which one until days later. I want to tell you what it was like inside. The bunks were metal with thin mattresses and rust on the frames. The lights never fully turned off. The food was not enough. We saved whatever we were given because there were stretches where nothing came in the commissary. Cost money most of us did not have. But what I remember most is the sound at night. Women crying quietly so they wouldn't wake the others. The particular kind of crying that is not loud, because you have already used up all the loud, and what is left is just this low, steady grief. That doesn't have anywhere to go. I became one of those women. I was allowed a phone call on the 2nd day. Marco answered on the first ring. He had called hospitals. He had called our lawyer. He had called everyone he could think of. Mrs. Delgado had kept all 3 children for 2 nights because Marco could not leave the phone. When I heard his voice, I could not speak at first. And then in the background, I heard Rosario. She had heard my voice through the phone. Just those few words. And she started saying mama, mama, mama in that way she had. Not upset yet. Just certain. The way toddlers are certain about things. Like she was just reminding everyone that she knew whose voice that was. I pressed the phone so hard against my ear, my hand went numb. That was the moment I understood how serious this was. Our lawyer filed an emergency motion. Denied. Filed another. Denied. She said the system was moving faster than anything she had seen before. Cases that used to take months were being resolved in days. There was almost no space left to fight in. She told us to prepare. I asked what that meant. She was quiet for a moment. And then she said, it means say what you need to say to your family while you still have time to say it. Marco drove 14 hours to see me. He could not bring the children. I understood why. I also sat in that visitation room and watched the door every time it opened. Some part of me hoping one of them would somehow walk through anyway. He brought photos instead. Elena in her school clothes on the first day back. Mateo at a birthday party, chocolate cake on his face, laughing at something off camera. Rosario asleep in the chair I always sat in, hugging the stuffed rabbit I had bought her the day she was born. She had fallen asleep in my chair. And Elena. My Elena had written me a letter in her careful 7-year-old handwriting. At the bottom, she had drawn a picture of our family. She had labeled everyone. Papa, Elena, Mateo, Rosario, Mama. She put me in the middle. I folded that letter and kept it pressed against my chest for the rest of the time I was there. They came for me on a Thursday morning before sunrise. No warning the night before. An officer walked into the bunk room at 5 in the morning and called 3 names. Mine was one of them. 1 hour to gather belongings. 1 phone call. I called Marco. He didn't answer. 5 in the morning. He had barely been sleeping for weeks, and I think his body had finally given out. I left a voicemail. I told him I loved him more than I had words for. I told him to tell Elena I had not forgotten the braid. I would never forget the braid. I told him Rosario likes her crackers broken in half because it makes her feel like she has more. I told him Mateo still needs the hallway light even though he says he doesn't. I said, do not let them forget my voice. I said, do not let them forget that. I chose them every single day, and that choosing them is the last thing I will ever stop doing. Then the call cut off. They put us on a bus, then a plane. I had a window seat. I watched the country. I had spent 11 years building a life and disappear below the clouds. And I thought about 3 children waking up in a few hours in a house that now had a room where nobody slept. I landed with no passport, no identification, no paperwork explaining the reason for my removal. My mother was at the airport because Marco had heard my voicemail and called her immediately. She looked older. She held me and I let her, but I was not fully there. I was in a kitchen in the southeast watching a small hand let go of the back of my shirt. That was 7 months ago. 7 months of video calls every evening when the connection holds. Elena has become the one who helps Marco with the little ones. 8 years old and already carrying things no 8-year-old should have to carry. She tells me about school in that careful way she has now, like she is choosing which details to give me, so I don't feel like I miss too much. She is protecting me. My 7-year-old is protecting me, and I do not know whether to be proud of her or heartbroken. I am both. I am always both. Mateo stopped talking for several weeks after I left. Just stopped. The school counselor called it a stress response. He talks now, but there is a quietness in him that wasn't there before. He used to be the loudest person in any room. Now he watches things more than he says things, and when he laughs, it always surprises me a little because for a moment, he sounds exactly like himself again. And Rosario does something that I cannot explain without my voice breaking even now. When we video call, she picks up the phone and holds it against her cheek. Not the screen. Her cheek. Like she is trying to feel me through it. Her father told me she does it every single time. That she will watch the whole call pressed against the side of the phone, as if she is waiting for warmth to come through. She is 2 years old and she has already learned that screens are not enough. She is 2 years old and she is already grieving in ways she doesn't have the words for yet. My lawyer is still working. There are provisions. There are arguments. There are paths that might still exist. Everything is slow. Everything except the part where they put you on a plane. That part was over before I understood it was happening. I am not asking you to feel sorry for me. I am asking you to understand what this looks like when it is not a statistic. A daughter who puts mama in the middle of the drawing. A son who stops speaking for weeks. A 2-year-old who presses a phone screen against her cheek because she doesn't know another way to be close. A voicemail recorded in a fluorescent lit hallway at 5 in the morning with crackers, broken in half and a hallway light left on. I did everything they told me to do. I showed up every single month for 6 years without missing once. And one ordinary Tuesday morning, I kissed my children and promised my daughter I would not forget. I have not forgotten a single thing. I just cannot get home. Whatever you believe about immigration, whatever side of that conversation you stand on, I only ask one thing. Before you decide how you feel about this story, think about a 2-year-old holding a phone against her cheek. Think about what she's waiting to feel.